not a town issue. And then just to kind of agree with, what's been said by some folks already, I have always liked the idea of exploring other uses for that alleyway that are more about, public space and what can we do there. And I'm fully behind looking into that. I've always been behind looking into that. And the traffic study that we had done as a town, and I think it was 2014, kind of supports that as being something that the town should at least look into. And I say this as a business owner, I'm not concerned about losing 2 parking spaces. As a town councilor, I'm concerned about $100,000, but like exploring, further uses of that alley, totally in support of, but the agreement, I don't think needs to be modified at this time.
Right, well.
You actually, because you already were aware of this email? Because, right?
Yeah, it came to me, Tim contacted
okay.
me, and because my job is not to manage the town, my job is to be one of 7 people who took the big picture. I immediately sent it to Sophie to say, I said to Tim, you need to talk to the town manager about this. And I congratulated him that he was given the opportunity because of COVID to have it up all winter. And that's how we went, that's how I did this. So I was very aware of it, but because it's not my job to interact with him about it, it's Sophie's and the staff's job. That's why I said I thought we should start with him saying his part. But we've all read the email that came to me from Tim asking if that could be continued again this year. And that was written before Delta variant put us in a situation where it's very similar to where we were last year at this time. So the 3 options that we were given as part of the packet here do not include the option that seems like what Tim was asking for. So the 3 options that we were given, it's the staff prepared, is to do nothing, which would mean that Tim would have to take it down October 15th. The second option is to direct staff to begin a process to develop options for the use of the alleyway. And 2 counselors have just said that they're interested in that, and 1 counselor said that would be something perhaps we could direct the staff to do. And the third is direct the staff to ask the current property owner if they're willing to modify the boundary agreement. And I don't think that Tim asked for any of that. He asked for the same thing he had last year, which was the opportunity to keep it up.
Lori, that's what would need to happen. So number 3, that's what would need to happen in order to give Tim what he's asking for.
So that's what
Yes.
the boundary agreement was.
He's not the property owner.
So
I
as a
don't
tenant.
know how, I only know the email that I got from Tim that said he was allowed to do it this year. I don't know, and the staff did not include how that happened. So you have more information than I do.
I'm just sitting here in the room and reading the document. So number 3 is, because Tim's not the property owner, we would have to approach the property owner to ask him if he is interested in going through a legal process with the town for us to modify the
Is
agreement
that what we
to
did
give
last
Tim.
year?
Yes.
No.
No.
I mean, no, not the
Last year, we
agreement,
were in the middle of a pandemic.
We're still in the middle of a pandemic.
right. Yeah, that was
Businesses
a
couldn't-
temporary.
So that last year we were in the middle of a pandemic and they didn't modify the boundary agreement. We just let him be outside all year. The staff did. I don't recall that we had a vote on it. I think it just happened.
The staff, yes, we were making decisions all over the place to help businesses doing things that we don't normally do because they could not welcome people into their establishments. Right now, people can welcome folks into their establishments, and we have gone back to our normal processes.
And Lori, I apologize. I thought you were saying, did we go through this process initially with the building owner, which we did. We had a legal
Last
contract.
year, he
Right.
he got a very short email to me saying he got the opportunity last year. He wanted to know if he could do it this year.
So last
And when he
year,
wrote that, we weren't in masks anymore.
right, we
No.
didn't, we weren't enforcing that piece of the boundary agreement because the circumstances were that people couldn't be going inside his establishment. But we are not, so the question here is not, are we going to ignore the boundary agreement? The question is, are we going to legally modify the boundary agreement? Or are we going to approach the actual owner of the building and ask if he's even willing to entertain that?
So I think the key word was, if I'm correct, or if I'm wrong, is this request for a permanent.
Yes,
So it's not a Delta variant driven thing, it's a permanent spot out there. Hence why we have to go through all these, looking at all these options.
Said.
I
It
can
didn't cause
tell
any issues. It was just a nice addition to the town, great for our business. So yes, well, he did talk about investing to improve it, so, although he did not use the word permanent.
It does say
Yeah, it does.
year-round temporary
Yeah.
outdoor seating. So I guess I'm just gonna weigh in with my opinion, and I know there's still questions lingering. I am in full support of year-round temporary outdoor seating, and in parallel to that, I think the town should look at making that green space inclusive of seating for restaurants on Mill Street. So that's my perspective.
Yeah, I'd like to second what Laura just said. In terms of parking, I think we defer to automobiles too much, not us as a town, I think us in general. Our preference is to make passageway for automobiles. I don't think that's great policy. I don't think it makes for a great community. I'm late to the party coming to this because I wasn't part of the deliberations last year, but I also believe that the pandemic is not over and we may return to more restrictive seating and indoor use. So I'd be loath to take something down and then ask a business owner to rebuild in what could be just a few weeks. And I think that if we pursue the second track, which is to look at a long-term plan for that area, it doesn't preclude us from approaching the landowner and looking at something in the line of a temporary easement. So while the property owner may be asked for a permanent change, the town could also ask the property owner whether he'd be willing to entertain a change for 4 months or 6
I
months.
have talked to the property owner,
Okay.
and the property owner is not interested in expanding a temporary use. I'll also tell you that as far as maintaining the way it's set up now as temporary, that it doesn't meet code. We're dealing with code enforcement issues there right now. The first snowfall we get, the way that is set up, we are gonna have a mess and a half unless what you're directing me to do is to completely cut off the alleyway so that we're not maintaining.
But we
I
have a
don't-
new $90,000 whacker that can plow small areas.
So I guess where does the priority for that come in? Because I don't know if you have lived through a normal snow season with us, but Rob Yerkes' favorite saying is, it's a snowstorm and I pulled another rabbit out of the hat because we have too much pavement to plow for the resources that we have and the time frame that people expected to be plowed. So I don't have a dog in the fight as to outdoor seating or not outdoor seating. I'm looking at this as we have an agreement in place right now that very specifically calls for temporary outdoor seating for certain months of the year. That agreement didn't just materialize out of thin air. That agreement was very carefully constructed, had conversations with Bruce around parking concerns, ADA compliance concerns. The way that's set up right now, we have had to, you're going to be directing people down the middle of the alleyway in the middle of icy weather because it is completely cut off the sidewalk from that direction. So I can envision a time when we could have a well-built, well-maintained, thought-out green space there. But I think it takes more than, from my perspective, given all of the use and conflict in that area, it's also the infrastructure corridor. I would want this, if there was going to be something there, it would need to go through a planning process. There would have to be agreements in place around taking it up because it would sit over the entire electrical path from Mill Street to Pine Street. It sits over the catch basins. It sits over the wastewater. And the town has invested heavily in that. This isn't, I don't mean to pick on a business owner, we're here to try to resolve issues, but how we got this far was the town trying to accommodate something in the middle of the beginning of a pandemic when we didn't know, gave them heat to put out there and allowed it to stay up. And I fielded concerns from downtown businesses with that. And it was up at a time when very few people were downtown because most of the businesses were in takeout mode, or there were not people gathering to go into restaurants. And it was up at a time when we had 50 inches of snow as opposed to 142 inches of snow, which is our normal. So this, yeah, if you want to accommodate this being up year round, I think there needs to be a lot more thought as to what you're going to require of it to be up, because in its present form, it will takes one hit of the edge of the plow. And I know you joke about the whacker and its ability to do stuff. That's a whole lot more time. And right now, time is a commodity that Public Works doesn't usually have when it has a 3-hour window downtown at the same time that it's supposed to be plowing the parking lots at the schools and municipal buildings. So I want to accommodate what council wants, but it feels right now like council might not be understanding the full ramifications of its desire to help a business.
So Sophie, if we, oh, go ahead, Jen.
Oh, I was going to ask,
Yeah, go ahead.
maybe I need some information from the petitioner as to the impact on his business if he is able to maintain this space and the impact, potential impact on his business if he's not able to maintain this space. I mean, I'm just throwing that out. I'd like to hear from Tim.
Well, Tim, if you step up and talk on this,
Yeah.
then I'll speak afterward.
Time?
Yep.
All right. I don't know where to say. I don't know what to say.
You're fine.
I don't know if you guys know me, I'm Tim. I know most of you, but, yeah, I don't know. So I guess I was coming to the council just to see, originally I would like to leave the patio up year round. It was up year round last year. I did talk to Rob Yerxa a little bit, and I did ask him about the plowing, and I understand last year we got off easy and there was no snow. But, he told, and it may be conflicting information, I'd love to hear from Rob himself, but he said it wasn't really that huge of an issue. And it didn't seem to pose a problem being up last year. I understand that that's a little bit of a mess right now. I guess, first and foremost, I would love to see that shut down. I mean, I know that there's a lot of mixed opinions about that, but for me personally, that would be parking spaces directly in front of my business. I mean, we also utilize those parking spaces. Currently, there isn't even a time. You can park there as long as you want. There's no sign at all. So it tends to be mostly employees that are parking there and taking up those spaces. So where's I going with this? I guess
What was the impact on your business of having that available in the winter?
the parking.
No, to have an outdoor patio last winter.
Well, it's, I mean, last year it was great. I think this year it'll be great too. I mean, we have been just struggling. We've been unable to get reopened. We're having a hard time restaffing. I mean, we've actually been closed now since March of 2020, the Orono location. So, I mean, this has been just a difficult time
So
for us.
it was up all winter, but you weren't open?
It was up all winter, but we weren't open. We had hoped to reopen with outdoor seating. We were mandated by the state to be closed until April. So for indoor
April
dining.
2021.
April 2021, yeah.
So you thought you would reopen.
So we thought we would reopen, but it never quite made sense. We thought that we would be able to reopen inside, space tables out and utilize the outside, but that mandate stayed in until April. So by that time, we were just 3 steps behind and couldn't catch up. And then there's been this labor shortage, which I don't know if you know, but it's like impossible to get people right now. So we've just continued to be closed. I built a whole new kitchen in there. We've invested into our business, and at this point, we're just looking at things like, well, what do we do now? I mean,
So given the closure since 2020 to present, there really is no way to assess the impact on a business if it's not been open.
Right, I don't know what having it in the winter time, I don't know how that would directly affect our business. What it would do is, it's a burden to take it down and put it up every year. In my eyes, it's only up, it's only taken down, October 15th. So it's just kind of those dead of the winter months that we have to take it down for. If it were allowed to be up year round, we could improve it. We could invest more money into our business and more money into our space and make it nicer. I mean, I would like to see it leveled off, kind of like when Dave Mylan had the pocket park. That exact thing is what I want to do. I want to have some sort of a deck to even it out with something that's easily removable, because I understand that there's a lot of stuff going on there that I probably don't know about underneath electrical. So, something that's easily removable, but still nice, and then you can, I ultimately would like to see that closed down, because I think that, Orono should be concerned with like pedestrians and, and outdoor spaces. I mean, I think the Yama's deck, maybe it wasn't how I would have envisioned it, but it's nice, I think the family dog is really nice, I think that's way better than that, death trap of a hill that you used to drive down there. So like I'm for outdoor seating and I'm for pedestrians and.
So Tim, if one of our options, the option that we all are looking at, if we all say, you know what, let's have staff really look at that alleyways being like a green space and just kind of close it off so that people can walk, through it. And then would you be amenable to taking that deck down in October?
Yeah.
And then knowing that the town is going to start looking at options, that there's no promises, might allow you to reconfigure or conceptualize what that might look like in a green space between those two, if that was something. And then you could take the deck down this year.
Yeah.
And then really start helping conceptualize what that might look like, if that was something that we might want to do. I know I'm in favor of that model too. And I also, being environmentally conscious, would like to see more walking space and more, more pedestrian movement. And then they'd all be, then there wouldn't be an issue about plowing. There wouldn't be an issue about, it would take some time though. I mean, it doesn't just happen overnight.
Right.
And it probably won't happen next summer,
Yeah,
but,
definitely.
but then, if that was something that you knew that we were working toward, would that be something that you would be amenable to?
I totally would, obviously, like the way it stands now is like we have to take it down, so I'm gonna take it down. I wouldn't just leave it up or do anything like that. I'm not, I would prefer to see, maybe like he was saying, some sort of like, a temporary thing. And I was kind of asking on my behalf because I know what a hassle it was to go through everything with the landlord, with the deck, and now, quite frankly, it is a bit of a mess. Like what I would love to see is for us to, improve upon our patio, have some sort of temporary agreement with Black Bear. I don't know how that works legally or any of that, but
Yeah, we can't make an agreement with the tenant. It would have to be-
or just, yeah, I mean, however that works is how, but maybe a small investment into improving the walkway, maybe just something as simple as some concrete barriers, something for like, so people can comfortably walk through there, because it is true currently, and this is true for snow, no snow, whatever, like right now, the way it is, you walk down sort of a walkway, and it does dump you out into the street, which is not the most pleasant thing for people walking down. And it's just such a, I mean, I see people walk down there all day, every day, families, everybody parks in the big lot, and they walk down there, they're either coming to like our place or Family Dog or Ampersand or whatever, because there's no parking over in that area. So like, I mean, I would love to see it at least temporarily set up to be more pedestrian friendly and still a drive-through if that needs, a lot of work, but I mean,
I'm sorry, can I just ask a question? Sophie, remind me, there's also a boundary issue on the other side of the alley? with
Yes.
Margaritas?
That was
Yes.
my other question.
So in terms of, this is, if I'm remembering correctly from when we first went through this whole process, one of the issues really in terms of figuring out how to make it safe for pedestrians and for cars to still travel and for it to be ADA compliant really is that there's another boundary. There was discussion of should we put the sidewalk on the opposite side of the alley, but there's a boundary issue with the Margaritas building. So the reason that council agreed to the temporary structure that would be down during the winter was because we felt that it really wasn't possible to make it safe and ADA compliant in the current situation. And as I said, when I was talking, like, Tim, I want you to have that patio all year round as a person and as a citizen of the town. And I agree with everything you're saying about pedestrian spaces. I've always wanted that alley to be shut down for vehicular traffic. But nothing has changed materially that would make it more safe or more ADA compliant or, nothing's changed since we made the initial agreement. So that to now try to figure out a way to make the patio work, it seems like taking 10 steps back and that there really isn't a way we could do it. Again, as someone who's going through being a tenant where my outdoor space has just been removed from my business, one of the things that we said when we were negotiating our lease is like, it would really harm our business to not have outdoor space. Can you work with us to try to figure out an alternative? And that's what we're going through with our property owner. And again, if I were looking at the Yamas deck, I would maybe feel a little like, hey, why don't I get access to that cool deck? And maybe that's something you could work out with your landlord or renegotiate a lease or something. But it would be very difficult under the current circumstances to change anything about the agreement that nothing's changed that would make this safer or more compliant for ADA issues,
well, I guess I would say that I almost think something has to happen, because I mean, there's no difference between October 14th and October 15th necessarily. I mean, you still have people walking and stuff. So like, I almost think something has to be done, because the way it is now, it's like, it's not a very comfortable, safe place to walk as is. So like, I guess I would think.
If I
So
could just
basically,
again, just check with Sophie, but I believe that I understand that if there's no snow, you're correct. There's no difference between the 14th and the 15th of October. But I think that we chose the dates based on, seasonal averages or what could be possible. If we had a big snowstorm in October, so it's not like all year round, there are safety concerns. It's when the possibility of snow exists, we can't make it safe or ADA compliant to the point where council is comfortable making it a permanent year.
So
But
we,
now
guys,
that-
we've got a busy agenda tonight, and we've already taken a half an hour on this one topic. I have to move on. But can you, Tim? And so I think what we need to do as a group here is to come up with our thoughts on where we're at. I'm gonna start by saying that I am like Tom. It's the original agreement. It's what I can sit here and fantasize about the possibilities of a green space and all that stuff. And not that it shouldn't or couldn't or wouldn't happen, but at this time right now to make sure that we deal with the issue at hand. Just for now, I mean, that was the agreement. And then we can revisit it at some time if need be, but so that's where I'm at. And so Laura, where are you at? I just want to make sure I can get everybody what their thoughts we can come to. a
Yeah, I
consensus.
already weighed in.
Okay.
I said I was fine to revise. And I think we should take action now about turning that into green space. Of just say, can we do that? And how?
Tom?
So I'm where I was at the beginning. I am not in favor of modifying the agreement. I am interested in looking at the possibility of revisiting that whole area and seeing what we could do with it. But recognizing that there are going to be, some of us are interested in making a green space. I think there are gonna be other people who are pretty interested in maintaining it the way it is,
Yeah.
so I don't think it's a done deal, what way that'll end up going.
We have also a lot of business people
Right.
impacted by that.
I concur with Tom.
I would like to see it become a green space. I think that if it were had a pedestrian walkway through there, that there'd still be access to get to any of the mechanicals that were necessary, and then there wouldn't be the less square footage of the plowing, except for a sidewalk plow. And under the one way that people do these, to test whether these kinds of changes have an impact, would be to put barriers now, so that this winter we would see how that impacted the businesses, and they would be, the barriers would be lifted up and moved around, so no change to the physical space except to block it off, so that it was only, cars couldn't drive through there. Yeah, so. and-
Where would you propose blocking it off at?
Well, if it were turning into a green space, it'd still have to have a sidewalk through it. And so basically, if it were turned into a green space, it would not be a driveway anymore, nor would it be parking.
Yeah,
So I'm just proposing.
I don't know if you can even do that. I mean, you, like, once again, I'm gonna go back. I know that we live in a world sometimes about like the betterment of our green space and saving things like recycling and all that. But the reality still is, and this is one of the things I struggle with, is that we forego thinking about the people who are business people who are impacted that contribute hugely to this community. I get that this is a great thought, but I just think that that in itself is going to be a huge thing to deal with, and it's not going to happen within just this. I don't personally see it
Right, so you
happening.
just asked- My opinion is,
Okay,
I'd like to see
great.
green space, the discussion, one of the options was to plan that for the future. I guess I'm saying that we last year already made changes to try to help our businesses have outdoor spaces. He had that opportunity, and it turned out he did not end up using that opportunity. But I just were dropping off my kid, and all over, they have outdoor spaces. And even though it was a really chilly day yesterday, we ate outside. And I looked down, there were parking spaces painted, and they had barriers, and they had picnic tables. And that's all, many other municipalities are doing that because of COVID. So I'm actually mentioning this thing that we would never do in our non-COVID times, which is just to give it a try as we work towards the planning.
Okay.
And then that would give information for those who are doing the planning on whether or not that was going to upset the other business owners, because they would see how it worked in this temporary situation.
And as to modifying the agreement.
That we would,
No. Do you want, the question as to whether we should approach the property owner to ask to legally modify the agreement or not?
I think we shouldn't do that until we decide what we want to
Okay,
do.
yeah, it seems like that's the question we're kind of
Yes,
split on.
yes, so my thought is that we appeared to have the power last year to make some changes that were quite quick for the way our town management and staff usually works, because we are in a pandemic and we're still in a pandemic, and we still want to support our business owners, and we still want a walkable town. So I'm not saying we shouldn't go through a process, but I'm also saying that because of the situation we're in, there might be able to do some short-term thing that would help us in learning for the process.
I am not in favor of modifying the agreement, of changing the agreement. I am, however, I do like the fact that we do have this option. And I did, at number 2, that we have the option of beginning the process. It's not doing it, but it's beginning the process. And it also, this also kind of outlines that we will talk to stakeholders who are part of that, who are part of our business community, because they are stakeholders. And technical advisors, as this agenda's been laid out, to determine logistical constraints or boundaries. It may not be possible, but at least it's a beginning of the process. So I would like to still stick with number 2, but I'm not interested in modifying the agreement at the moment.
I support the extension of the space in its current use. I mean, I guess that's number 3. If there doesn't seem to be appetite among the board to pursue that, I would say that I'd like to study future use of that space sooner rather than later, and not wait until the next issue comes up. Like, I'd like to be proactive with our planning. I believe there's another comment.
What's that?
I thought Bruce had helped.
Bruce, did you have a comment?
Yeah, yes. One of the things that we dealt with this green space issue before. And we dealt with these parking places, and there's more than 2 places that are involved, parking places that are involved in this. And last year, when it didn't come down, I didn't complain because we didn't have a parking problem last winter because of COVID. This year, we will have a parking problem unless we get closed down again. But one thing that you haven't really touched on is the fact that when this green space issue was up the last time, I did 2 different surveys of every business in town. I went around to everybody. Now, the first one they rejected because they didn't have signatures and they didn't trust my county. Second survey I did, I got signatures. 90% of the downtown businesses are against turning that into green space. It would affect the traffic flow. I even spoke to a couple of the police officers. They wouldn't like to see it because they wouldn't come out and endorse it because their jobs are in jeopardy. But they were not happy with closing that off. It would put a tremendous burden on Oak Street and the next street down, which is it Pleasant?
Pleasant.
Yeah, it would direct all of the traffic down to those poor people. Now, Oak Street, as narrow as it is a problem. And I just don't think that would be fair to the people who live on those streets. So parking, take into consideration the people, the businesses, downtown people, like I say, 90% of them were against it. And the problems, the traffic problems we're going to have would be a lot harder.
Great, thank you. So definitely a balance between, I mean, I'm an advocate as a business owner, I'm an advocate for business as well, but it's a balance of citizens that also like those kinds of things too. So we have, 10,000 people who live in town. So it's kind of a whole global thing that we have to kind of look at as also, but thank you for your input on that. So it's safe to say that everybody kind of doesn't want to modify, or most people don't want to modify, but to look at the possible kind of green space type thing to research and look at in the future. We're good. Let's move on to B, which is revision to the Orono Code of Ordinances, Chapter 8 buildings to allow for installation and maintenance of outdoor solid fuel boilers in low density residential LDR and forest and agricultural F&A zoning districts. It's actually quite an interesting read.
I try to make things interesting for you. Just very quickly, this is not a one-time issue. This has come up a couple of times, kind of cycles through. But back in the mid-2000s, outdoor wood boilers or outdoor solid fuel boilers became very popular as an inexpensive way to heat when oil prices went way up. Communities across the state were dealing with people putting outdoor wood boilers in areas that were not designed, the density was such that it was really causing conflict. So many communities adopted bans on outdoor wood boilers. Orono was one of them. So if you look, that revision came in, I think, in 2007. The technology has changed. The state of Maine has adopted emission standards for solid fuel boilers. And we received a request, somebody who's trying to sell some property that has an unlicensed outdoor wood boiler, asking what they could do. So Kyle and I spent some time with Pat, who's up on the screen, to look at this issue. Pat reviewed what other towns have done. And we also talked to the town attorney just on structure. And where we have come down is that outdoor solid fuel boilers are not in and of themselves bad. The conflict comes when they're not put in right, or there's not enough distance buffer between other residential uses. So the revision that we are proposing in the ordinance would allow outdoor solid fuel boilers freestanding or in an accessory structure, as long as it was in the low density residential zone, which has a larger lot size, or the forest and agriculture zone, and had at least 100 feet setback from property lines or other dwellings that are not associated with the use. So, for example, if I had on my parcel of land, my house and my brother's house, and my house, I wanted to put an outdoor wood boiler, I've got to be 100 feet from my property lines and 100 feet from my brother's house. If it was heating both houses, then I would say you don't need the 100 feet because you're both utilizing it. Is kind of where we came to. Kyle reviewed it and Pat reviewed it, and I think they're fine with the language, but I'll let them speak for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just jump in that, yeah, in reviewing it, I mean, this isn't really necessarily an amendment to the land use section. It's not an activity. This is usually something that Pat would permit over going to the planning board or anything like that. But yeah, that it seemingly makes sense. I mean, we've come across these sorts of things in our ordinance before, where it was language that was put in a certain place that was based on certain standards at the time. As new technologies come out, it makes sense to kind of revisit these issues and make certain updates. And you know, seeing as our low density residential and our forest and agriculture district have the lot size requirements that they do, yeah, it does seem to make sense that they could, you know, exist in those areas without causing some of the concerns that people might have in closer quarter spaces. So yeah, I'll let Pat add on to that.
Oh, you're still muted.
All right. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So this would be, you know, a permitted use, and I would be doing my inspections to make sure that they are installed with the manufactured specs. And one of the biggest things is informing people to use the proper material to be putting into this. Wet wood is going to cause an issue, and, you know, having a stack that goes up above the peaks of any structure to get that smoke up into the air is a big concern. So if they're installed to the manufactured specs, they shouldn't be an issue. Any questions?
Now they're not allowed
Correct.
in any,
Yeah, based on
and in this one, it would need to get, it's not allowed because they're not allowed anywhere. So the request of the landowner was that we change the ordinance, or the request of the landowner is to get exception for the fact that.
Right, no, it's
She can't get an exception. You
Right.
can't just give her an exception.
So it changed after this was actually installed. That's when the ordinance was changed, correct?
So no, the issue is that any installation before the ordinance changed, as long as it was a legal installation, would be a legally non-conforming use. In this particular case, it was never permitted. It was not a legal installation. Therefore, it is not a legally non-conforming use. It is an illegal use. Staff used its judgment and elected to not pursue code action and direct the boiler to be taken out, to give council the opportunity to consider whether or not it wanted to make the change.
So the boilers are used for the greenhouses, is that correct? Is that what she uses this for? the wood boilers to heat the
So
greenhouses?
it is, but I'm gonna caution you that while that is the impetus for the discussion on this fast track out of nowhere,
Yeah.
this should not be seen as a change for this property. You need to think of this as in the LDR and in the FNA. Do you feel like there is enough
Okay.
space that you can
Use-
ensure that if
Yes.
somebody puts it in their property? I can tell you that, for example, in some section, in the MDR, most
Mhm.
sections of the MDR, we wouldn't be having this discussion, right?
Right.
Because there's too much conflict, because you can't get a setback.
Thank you. That,
Does that help?
yeah, that helps. Thank
All
you.
right, don't want
I-
to tell you how to do your job. but-
Well, no, I mean,
No, I
I was,
agree.
you know what, honestly, Sophie, I was gonna say a similar thing, and I felt this way during the last conversation, is like, I always am like a people first, I'm worrying about an individual circumstances. We have to be very careful as a council, not to just be doing concierge ordinance revisions for people or concierge legal services, like, we really need to move into the broader focus when we, and that was my first instinct when I read this background. I was like, oh, does she have one? Like, would this ordinance revision help her? And then I had to remind myself, like, it doesn't matter whether it would help her or not. That's not the question we're considering. So, yeah, I mean,
I was
yeah.
more curious about the use of a
Yeah,
wood
so,
boiler
yeah,
outside,
and-
and I know that she has greenhouses and that she has sold the property,
Yeah.
so.
And it is really tempting. I always do that. too.
But, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I was looking at the individual person, like, can we help? But in this case, to kind of, again, I don't know whether this would have anything to do with her greenhouse or not, but it does seem like it's always a good idea for council to be reviewing its ordinances and policies as things develop and things change. And it sounds like quite a lot has developed and changed since this was put into place, and I would be very comfortable with those particular districts having this allowed use.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree. I do, like, so there's comfort that even the smallest potential lot size configuration in LDR, that it's still not gonna be disruptive to neighbors, like, is there a way to?
Yeah, that's where we put in the 100-foot setback from any property line or
Right,
neighbor, even if they were on the same parcel.
okay. It just, that doesn't seem that huge to me, 100 feet. So while I'm comfortable with this, I just don't know, like, at a full build out of LDR, like, the area that we happen to be thinking of is not currently at full build out, but it looks like it will be. Do we think it's gonna be disruptive to neighbors? Not like necessarily at this like commercial uses. I guess I'm trying to like see if there are specific ways to further narrow this, that every just residential property, and I'm mostly concerned about LDR versus FNA. But if you tie it in with commercial uses also, that might have more of a need for this, does that make more sense? I'm not opposed to this, but I'm just kind of asking, like. Or can you give me an example of an area that's LDR that's at like full build out of minimum lot sizes?
So I can just chime in a little bit. I mean, actually, there's probably more smaller lots in the forest and agriculture than there are in the LDR. The LDR is a newer district in general, so most of the subdivisions that have taken place there abide by that minimum lot size, which is 60,000 square feet, so almost an acre and a half. Whereas in the forest and agriculture, you have a lot of, especially around the lake, you have a lot of smaller lots, which were grandfathered from quite a while ago, which are substantially less than the minimum lot size. I would say with the 100-foot setback to either property line, then you'd basically need a lot that was at least 201, over 200 feet wide. And, I mean, the minimum lot size or minimum lot size width in the LDR is, I believe, 150 feet outside of subdivisions and 100 feet in subdivisions. So you need to be talking about lots in the LDR that at least met the current minimum lot standards. But yeah, there is Grant Road is a 20 lot subdivision in the MDR. All those lots haven't been developed, but that was a subdivision that created its lots solely based on those standards. A lot of the lots along Stillwater Ave in the LDR are also above that 60,000 square foot minimum lot size mark. So I think most of the district meets those current minimum lot requirements.
Help you?
So Grant Road, he said is MDR, but it's LDR, right?
Yeah. And
So
No, LDR, yeah.
okay. And like those lots would be too small. Right? Is that what he was saying?
Yes, Kyle.
I was simply saying that most of the lots in that district meet the minimum lot requirements of that district. I forget off the top of my head exactly what the lot widths are, but I mean, the point I was trying to make is, in general, the LDR is larger scale lots, and that one of these wouldn't be permitted on a smaller lot if it didn't meet that setback size. And I think those setbacks came roughly from things like the DEP guidelines and standards that already exist for these elsewhere at the state level. I mean, I think Pat might be able to speak a little bit more to that effect, but yeah, the LDR area as it is now is, it was created to be a transitional area between, the kind of growth area in town and the rural area. But what's now the LDR was primarily part of the rural area before it was LDR. So I think it's got more of that rural feel to it than it does the in-town feel of things like the MDR and the C2 and downtown. That was really all I was trying to get at.
I'm in favor of the revision.
I'm in favor of the revision.
So it seems like we're all pretty much in favor of it.
Right. So do we want to move it forward to public hearing and formal consideration in September?
That would allow it to be adopted in September and valid in October. So we could begin
That
issuing
makes sense.
permits in October.
I'd be in favor of that option.
And you notice the ordinance also explicitly requires a permit.
Great. So we're done with that. So I'm gonna move this off to Tom now.
Why, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So Finance and Operations Committee, and item A is review of bill credit agreement with DeWitt Solar. And I think that might be Bell.
You would be thinking correctly.
There you go.
Hello,
Bell.
everybody.
So
So I believe that you guys heard from Dan Dixon last month, the month before. I'm starting to lose track of my summary, apparently, who introduced this idea of net energy billing with a solar project. The project was brought to us. It's actually going to be constructed in Old Town out by the airport. And so it was specifically came to us because it is a neighboring community. We went to the attorney to discuss, do we need to go out to bid to determine whether or not we have to search for the best project, if this is the type of net energy billing path that we'd like to go down. And the answer came back that we did not. So we continue to discuss the idea with this one provider. It's a strictly paper process, but it does allow us to purchase a large percentage of our or offset a large percentage of our electricity use every year with a renewable energy source. So because it is a paper process, it gets a little bit complicated, and Sophie laid it out pretty well in the background. But I will go ahead and start down the path. And if anybody has any questions, please let me know. The idea is that we will become 15% owners of the project, the solar project. That solar project, when it is up and running, it will create energy every month, a certain amount. That certain amount is going to be variable. In the summertime, we will have, lots and lots of energy being produced, and in the wintertime, a little bit less, because of course we have many fewer hours of sunlight. Every month, the Versant will put onto our bill a credit that will be equal to 15% of the production from that solar project. We will then turn around and pay to Sincarfa, who is the project developer, 87% of the value of that credit that was on our bill. The net result to us is that we are getting a 13% discount on the energy that we are purchasing, that's covered by the agreement. So we're saving money. The other piece that we put into this agreement is that every year Sincarfa will purchase for us roughly 1,000 recreational energy credits, which is each energy credit is equal to 1,000 kilowatt hours. So we would be, and those would be, I said recreational, I meant renewable. Renewable energy credits. Those would not be renewable energy credits directly from the solar project, but they would be a tier 2 or class 2 energy credit that is likely to be from an older hydro project in the state of Maine. We've asked that they be state of Maine recs so that we can say that we're kind of supporting close to home projects. So the net result of this is that we will save money. We're supporting a local project, and we will actually be able to support another local project with renewable energy credits and retire those so that we are indeed purchasing renewable energy.
Good job.
And also, it doesn't cost the town anything to do
We
this.
save a little bit of money.
Right.
That's good.
So, but it costs us to support those two second-tier recs. So that's
So
something.
the baseline offer was for a 15% discount rather than the 13% discount. Those recs are essentially costing 2% of the discount. When we went ahead and we calculated the current value of recs, this is a 20-year agreement as well. So we calculated the current value of the RECs based on the current value of the discount, and they were roughly equivalent. So if the town would be purchasing renewable energy credits on their own, which we don't really have the relationships to do. We don't know who the brokers are. We don't know necessarily how to do it. But it's roughly a break even in terms of the renewable energy cost and the 2% that we are foregoing. But we are still saving money over what we are currently doing.
We have not, as a town, purchased renewable energy credits in the past.
No,
We do not need to purchase renewable energy credits, to get this electricity to invest in this project and to get the lower price energy. So this is just a nice thing. I guess I mentioned it before we discussed this. There are businesses and there are municipalities that have promised to support renewable energy as in some kind of law. They say they must, and that then therefore becomes a part of their budget because they must be supporting it. And as much as I love that we would support renewable energy credits, it's not in our list of things we said we'd be promising to pay for. So that extra, that % is money that
We'll get back. That 2% is money that we'll get back. We're not losing any money.
we don't get it back.
We're
We're
breaking even.
investing in renewable energy credits.
And we're
with that
getting the
money.
2% back in those recs when they retire.
we are, with the 2%, we are purchasing renewable energy credits. That's what we are doing with that 2%, is that we are purchasing renewable energy credits. It is correct that we are not required to purchase renewable energy credits. When council heard this, the presentation from Dan Dixon, the direction from council was that as a body, the majority believed that it was important that if we were saying that we were purchasing, that we were using renewable energy, that we were actually owning the renewable energy credits and that we were retiring them, rather than merely entering into the agreement with the solar farm. And then those solar RECs get sold off into a Massachusetts market, and then somebody else is truly purchasing that renewable energy. If we don't have RECs, all we're doing is getting a discount on our bill, which is a valuable thing to do, but council thought that the environmental impact of retiring renewable energy credits was important.
So retiring, does that mean there's, at some point, there's money that comes to us at the end? That's what Cheryl is saying.
No, that when we buy them, what we're doing, so renewable energy credits, you can trade them. The class 2, the tier 2s are not worth as much as the tier 1s, which is what the solar projects are. If you have them, if we had them and we decided that we wanted to go forward and sell them on, we would be able to do that. That is an allowable use when you hold those cards. Instead, what we are saying is we are taking renewable energy and we are the end user of this renewable energy. We are not going to trade on the value of this certificate any further. We're the end user. And that's what retiring a REC means, is that you're the end user of that renewable energy.
We'd be paying money to have these things that are an investment of virtue, but there's no return on the investment other than the virtue.
It is it's a value that council, a value decision that council set us forward to make.
Right, and I'm a member of council, and I'm saying that I love the idea of supporting this solar farm and buying our electricity from them, and I don't love the idea of buying virtues.
Okay, so you were heard last time, you were heard tonight, and the majority of council set staff on a direction. Staff has provided what the majority of council asked for. So I would just like to weigh in, if that's okay, that I like this, I want to move forward with that, like, thank you for the work. I think that it's what we're hoping to see.
So let's see what other councilors have to say.
I agree that we went the route that was when we discussed this last time, so I'm on board, and thank you for all the work.
I also had a great follow-up conversation with Dan a few days after that, where he clarified some more things, so I feel even better about it now than I did then.
Dan Dixon is
He's amazing.
amazing.
Yes, very smart.
I know, exactly. I also am in favor of this, and I'm also in favor of the virtue, because I believe that that's where we're headed as a town as well.
I support it based on our previous discussion.
So,
Yeah, same.
Yeah, and I agree. I'm in favor of this. Moving forward with it.
I loathe because you're actually coming to a consensus or an agreement, but there is more than just a virtue here. If you look, and we should be looking at the horizon for long-term planning, and we're doing climate action planning, and we're talking about our carbon footprint, and we want to be able to articulate a commitment to the environment. This is a 20-year contract. By purchasing the renewable credits now, I think long-term, it's going to dovetail in with your plans, and it will be a benefit.
Okay, I think we've heard from everybody, and the clear majority wants to move forward with this. So thank you for the information, Bell, and all the work you've done on it. And I think we're ready to move on to the next item. And the next item is mislabeled. It should be B, not A again. Community facility assessment process and next steps.
It's just A this evening.
I've got multiple A sequels going on here today. So I need a little bit of help. The purpose of this item is not to do my job for me, but to give me some feedback. Number one, to make sure that I'm on the right path, and number two, if there are deliverables that council is going to be looking for, I would want to include it in the initial work. So we have several community buildings, and when I say community building, I am differentiating between buildings that primarily hold operations. So you know what the town hall is for, you know what the police department's for, you know what the pool house is for, Public Works, WPCS, the library. I would argue we probably know what Birch Street School is about, but that is a community building. The operations that happen in that building are primarily outward facing, and they're used by the community. The Keith Anderson House would be another one. 98 Penobscot Street is just the albatross around our neck. And there is the old fire station on North Main Avenue, all kind of community buildings without a defined purpose. During the budget, council was presented with a few larger ticket items for Keith Anderson House and North Main Avenue Fire Station, and the perennial discussion of what are we going to do with 98 Penobscot Street. And through that process, the idea was floated that this needed more than just a budget discussion, that instead we really needed to get some help at looking at these community buildings in terms of priorities. What are the uses? What are the needs for the community? So we heard things like, it's really important to have a place that you can have a birthday party. I really don't want to hold birthday parties in council chamber, right? So it's really important that we have a place to recreate. You know, what do we have and what's important to the community? Councilor Wingard generously picked up his phone when I called and has actually met with Rob Yerxa and Mitch Stone and with me. And where we kind of came to was an idea of, we all agreed that it wasn't just my perception that we needed some outside help, that this is not something that staff can really do. We think somebody from the outside that could help walk council through a public process to understand the community's desires, needs for space, talk with staff about how they're maintained, and what resources we have, And then come back to us with kind of a priority list of what was important. And that would give council kind of a baseline to then be able to make decisions about, do we keep it? Do we try to do a partnership with it? Do we sell it? Do we, if we're gonna put $1 million into a building, what are we doing it? What's the purpose of that building? Am I on track?
Yeah, we don't even know how to triage at this point.
Yes. And so what we were looking at is an initial request for proposals that would go out with a very limited initial scope. So we're trying to find the person to work with us. In doing it a little bit like we did with Public Works Garage, where we didn't say, tell us what your qualifications for building a Public Works Garage are. We instead said, we think we need a Public Works Garage and we don't know where it might be able to be. So could you come help us figure that out? So it was only about a $12,000 scope when we started. And then as we got the answer to the first question, we began to build on it, but we knew we had the right entity with us. I think that was kind of our thought for this one, is a smaller scope to begin with, to get to the priority piece and understand and help have a conversation with the community, not just a few community members, but try to get as much feedback as we can. So that involves going out for RFQ, which is a lengthy process, but I have confirmed that Councilor Wingard is happy to help us with that. I want to make sure that we're on the right track in a way that council can support, because what I don't want to do, spend a lot of time to solicit RFQs, think we have the right person, come back to council and have you not happy with the scope and not happy with our selection process. Or not even want to do the project, which is going to take time. And we're going to have to find money for it.
So I, for one, think you're on the right track. I know Megan and I spent a lot of time with engineers looking at the Keith Anderson building and knowing, like, a pretty good idea of what needs to be done there, but never had a very clear idea of what the best use of that property was going to be. And I think this is a process that would be very helpful for all of those buildings.
Yeah, I agree. In terms of, is staff on the right track in the background? I think this is right on the money. It's especially going to be interesting to go through this process now that we are starting the rec after school program and have access to that space that is taxpayer funded space that does serve a specific community need, and whether that's going to actually work out and be a long-term viable option, we'll certainly weigh into this as we evaluate town buildings and what the community needs are. I think this is on the right track for me.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
I agree. I'm currently looking for a big space to do a community build for weatherization for window insert, which is another project, and I can't find any. So I think it would be nice for us to have a community building someplace that we could offer up to residents if they need something like that. So I support all of those. Let's do it. It's time.
We all know Jeff's on board.
Thank you, Jeff, by the way. Thank you for stepping up on that.
A fun time. Fun to be had by all.
Any other comments from council members? Sounds like you're on the right track, Sophie.
So
Go
given
forward.
the schedule right now, I'm gonna guess that we probably would be looking at putting out an RFQ in mid-October. We should be able to get something together by then, and then go from there. Awesome.
Now we move on to item C, which is fire department staffing and budget concerns. Another exciting topic.
It is, and I think I've got a fire chief in the background, but I tried to lay out background for you this is not the first time that we have been in a situation where our overtime to cover sick and vacation time is far exceeding our budget. Most of the time when we get into this scenario, we start looking at floaters, which a floater is simply a full-time employee that is not assigned to a single shift. I laid out a bunch of background. I don't want to take a ton of time away from this. I would say that the new information that I have in the background, I told you that we have a planned retirement in 6 months. So what we are suggesting to council is if we could go ahead and hire our floater, we know we will pay for the 6 months of wages and benefits will be a little bit cheaper, even if this person comes in at top of scale with all the benefits than the overtime would be. And staff and I are continuing to look. We believe that we can easily justify 2 floaters at this point. I'm not ready to bring that data back to you. We have a few more tests to do of that data. And at that point, I'll let you know probably next month whether we are going to come back with another request. I want to put this in perspective that asking firefighters to, or any employees to work overtime has 2 costs. One is the financial cost, which is all through your background, where I have demonstrated the dollars and cents. The other cost is that of somebody that is scheduled to work 24 hours at a time, supposed to be working a schedule of 48, 48, 48, 24, for an average of 42 hours a week. And last week I had a firefighter who was not running around trying to get overtime. It's the overtime that he probably would have been tagged with anyway, worked 120 hours. So that's the intangible, non-financial side that we just cannot continue to ask our employees to put out at that level. We went to this shift complement for, I think, very sound reasons around retention. And the problem that we're having is people are out. People are out because they get injured. People are out because they get sick. People are out because we have a younger crew. We're cycling through to a younger crew that they're having babies, and state and federal law says they get time off when they have babies, and things that I think we have to plan
It should,
around.
even if state and federal law didn't say it.
I know, even if they didn't, we would, right?
babies.
So what I'm asking for is the ability to add another full-time person on shift. That is, I don't have any more money for them. We are in the red. We are going to be in the red with overtime. Chief and I are looking at the budget. I'm trying to see if there are things that we can do to allocate out of last year to help us this year. We're closing the books in the next 2 weeks, so I'll have an answer for you before the next committee meeting. But yeah, we're trying.
So Sophie, if I understand it correctly, we will have a 6-month trial period to see if we're actually saving money, if this floater makes sense.
Yep.
If it doesn't seem to be saving us money and it's not making sense, we're going to have a vacancy we can slot that person into.
Exactly.
So from my perspective, there's very little risk in doing this. You and Chief are pretty well convinced you can save money during that 6-month period. Well, let's see if you do. And we'll have a chance to evaluate that and see if we want to continue with it or add to it or just move that person into the vacancy. Am I on the right track here?
I think you're right on the right track. And, you know, I would say, just to make sure we're all on the same page, when I say savings, it is mitigating
Less in the
a
red.
known overrun.
Yep.
We're still in the red, just less in the red than we were.
Yes.
in the other.
Yes,
Well,
Yeah.
and there's personnel, I mean,
yeah,
there's savings on the wear and tear of our
Absolutely,
our employees.
absolutely.
Right, that was what I was gonna say. I agree with everything that Tom said, and it's very low risk, and I know that as a counselor, like, I'm supposed to, like, fiduciary responsibility is supposed to be the primary, but honestly, when it comes to, this isn't like, you're working at a flower shop, like, this is a high-stress, intense job, to ask people to continually push themselves beyond the limit of what they should be doing is, it's a safety risk, and it's a risk for them as well, for their health and safety, and I worry about that a lot. So for me, it's not only that this is low risk for 6 months, but it's an opportunity to make sure that we are not overtaxing our staff who have very demanding, very difficult jobs.
You don't think a flower shop is very demanding?
Not as demanding as being a firefighter.
Every job is demanding.
I'm gonna come out and just say that. I don't think it is.
When would, no offense to flower shop owners.
I love flower shop. owners.
When would you make a decision to hire a second floater? If that was a,
So technically, I can make these decisions, right? I would be silly not to get permission from council because I'm gonna overrun the budget and that would be bad. Our goal is to get the first floater on by October 1st. And I think that's what Chief is gonna be focusing on, is getting that person hired. I'm gonna take the data that Bell and Chief have pulled and put it into a more usable format, and then we're gonna test it. Our assumptions against the next few weeks to see how close we are. Because that will tell me how close I am for the rest of the year, if I'm, and so I would assume that we're probably gonna be back to you in late September or early October to talk about at least what our data is showing us. I think our request at that point is gonna be completely contingent upon how many hours of overtime our people are still working, what the savings we've seen with the, that I think all kind of comes together and, yeah.
okay.
Do we see times a year where overtime is higher than other times?
So overtime for vacations, we see a lot from May through October, September, October. It tends to get pretty skinny in November, December because everybody wants to be with their families, so nobody tries to take lots of time off unless there's a real problem. My issue is vacation overtime, we can plan for, we can control with policies and contract negotiation. And we also can control only one vacation is allowed on shift at any one time. So the most we would ever fill on a shift is one person. It is the illnesses that is causing an issue. So we have right now, we have a long-term workers' comp injury, been out for over a year. We have a firefighter who has had an emergency medical issue who has been out for a couple of weeks, and we expect them to be out for, I think, at least 10 more. And we have a firefighter who is welcoming a new baby, and we expect them back at the beginning of October. That's just what we know. What I think the trends are going to show, I haven't trended in a little while, is that we are picking up. We pretty much always have somebody out. Every shift that we have somebody out for, we backfill so that we meet minimums around operational needs. Mostly it's EMS. I think if you have questions, the chief could walk you through that. Helpful?
Yeah, I was wondering whether the floater is going to be equally useful at all times of year. But it seems like.
I think in the past, we've used that position and it has not been, usually they can go on a shift for a period of 3 or 4 weeks and then transition to a different shift for 3 or 4 weeks covering. And I say it's a lot less apt to have 6 people on a shift because that person would still work. We put them somewhere. And that is not a common occurrence.
Other questions or comments?
Let's do it.
Sounds like everybody is supportive of the move.
That was easy.
Yeah. So go forward.
The things you want to have passed, you need to put at the end of the agenda.
Method to the madness.
So item D and the last item on our committee agenda, the last item for our action is revocable trail use license to the Orono Land Trust. And I think this is going to be a very easy discussion.
I hope so. So the town of Orono is quite blessed to have an incredibly open, collaborative relationship with the Orono Land Trust. We do a lot of work with them. In fact, at times it's very difficult to see the difference between the Orono Land Trust work crews and the town Trails Committee work crews. Oftentimes, usually it's Dave Thompson will show up in my office with a beautiful color pencil map to describe their latest project. And just based on the history of our relationship, I 90% of the time simply support what they're doing if it's in keeping with kind of what we would expect. Every once in a while, they have something that will come back to council, but not a lot of the time. So Bucky Owen came to visit me to talk about a grant application that they're making to the state of Maine to improve the railroad bed. It will connect Old Town to the city forest, the Bangor City Forest. It is across 2 parcels of town-owned land. And he asked for a letter of support. I have given lots of letters of support. So I dutifully wrote out a lovely letter of support about why the town supports their grant application. He came back because as a landowner, the grantor, the funding agency, requires right title or interest in the parcels that you're going to be improving. So what they have suggested for us is a revocable license. So one that we can take back with, I think it's 60 days notice, but it's us saying we are legally granting you the ability to improve our land. So when you think about ownership rights, if you think about the town's ownership of a parcel like a quiver of arrows, and if you sell the whole thing, you give away the whole quiver. You give an easement, you give away a few of them. A revocable license is like letting somebody borrow an arrow and you can get it back. However, it is giving right that the town owns, which is council's job. It's not my job to do that. I can give temporary right. I do temporary things all the time. I cannot sign a document that would give somebody a perpetual right, even though we can revoke that right. So Bucky needs the letter as soon as we can. It really needs to be on a regular council agenda as opposed to a special council agenda. My recommendation is to let me go ahead and negotiate it, write it and execute it and get it to him so that they can apply for the grant and have it appear on your September 13th council meeting in the consent to confirm the license.
And the grant is primarily, what are they thinking of grant money? Just to clear the land? What's the
No,
grant money?
I think it's an existing
Ooh.
trail. I think they're trying to improve the trail so it can be
So they need
traveled.
equipment, they
Yeah,
need
I know
things like
part of
that.
it is we would donate, as we do just as a matter of course, ground up gravel, ground up asphalt. Is it Butcher Pond? Was that the? I don't remember, but there is a particular piece of the loop that we are committing to try to help them put that ground up asphalt if we have it.
Yeah.
So it's about trying to make it more accessible, Cheryl.
Mhm.
It is all existing.
Yeah, I've been on,
Infrastructure.
yeah, I've been on that trail. I was just curious where the money, what the money was
There was a
for.
very interesting article in the Sunday Times yesterday about conservation groups like the Orono Land Trust
Mhm.
using abandoned railroad beds all over the country to make walking, biking trails, and how
Yeah.
successful it is and how
Oh,
much
Cape
people
Cod
are
Rail
enjoying it.
Trail is
Yeah.
bumping all the time.
Yeah. No, I'm in favor.
Just like the beginning parts of making that, when we talked a while back about the full
That's,
circle.
it's a
Mhm.
piece of it. That helps with part of the loop.
Okay.
So it's not just a great idea now, it's a
Right.
long-term
Right.
good idea.
Right.
Anybody have any problem with this? I think this is a great,
Love our
Support.
Orono Land Trust. I think our Orono Land Trust is the only volunteer land trust
Yeah.
too.
they're one of the very few that is, what do they call it? Nationally certified?
Accredited,
Accredited.
accredited, yeah. We
Yeah.
help a little bit with that. We provide some space for them, but the partnership, one of my cousins works for a state land trust in Maine, and she is just overwhelmed with how amazing the Orono Land Trust relationship is, and I'd love to keep it.
Well, to give another story, I have a cousin who was the executive director of the Booth Bay Land Trust, paid position.
Yeah.
And she can't believe what our volunteer people do. She's done a lot of great things with land access and so forth, but I can't believe these volunteers do all that work in Oregon.
I think this is the last holdout. This is the last volunteer land trust.
Okay, you have what you need for that item?
I do,
Something?
I do.
And you had put down on the agenda of town manager's report.
I have one item that I want to talk to people about. The state is grappling with the Delta variant. The state of Maine has not issued any formal directives regarding wearing face coverings. So everything that we're doing is based on the recommendations that staff are receiving from the public health team. When we look at the remote meeting agenda platform and policy, our policy says we want everybody to meet in person. And if you can't be here, you have to have a reason. There are several reasons that are okay. And we expect the chair of the committee or the meeting to be in person. So I am going to suggest that sitting in a meeting, taking away the ability for people to see facial expressions, which I think is a big piece of nonverbal communication, and in an environment where, quite frankly, I know we have counselors that are not comfortable being here, even with face coverings on. So I am wondering where council wants to come down on this. We could follow the policy, and anybody who doesn't want to be here could be, come in remotely. I think that it's a different meeting quality when you have everybody here versus everybody remote versus a little bit of each. I know that from a staff perspective, I don't do hybrid meetings on Zoom. I'll either, if we're gonna have somebody go remote, then we'll all go remote so that we can see each other. So I have had some calls and some questions, and it is not my decision to make. I can offer guidance. I can tell you that if we wanted to go full remote, we either we'll probably be stretching the ability to do full remote a little bit. So what's the consequence? You wait for somebody to say, we don't like it, and then we deal with it at that point. That's an option. There are towns that are doing that right now. It would be easy if the state came out with an executive order that said, this is what you need to do.
Sophie, does it, when you're talking about stretching, does it make it more open to legal interpretation for any decisions?
I don't know, because I think if we were doing something that was clearly a violation, like clearly a violation, then that would be a problem. If we weren't doing roll call votes, if our policy said you had to have a quorum in person and we weren't, I think that would cause an issue. Town council has a lot of discretionary power. I know we like to stay in between the lines because it's safer there. But I don't think we're gonna get the safest answer, which is if we wanna go full remote, to have the state tell us to do that. I don't think they're going to. So another option is to put the chair of the meeting and me in council chamber and have everybody else remote, which is allowed under our policy. Or we could amend the policy to say that council chamber will be open, which means I'd be sitting here, and everybody else could be remote if they wanted to be. So I don't know what you guys want to do, but I do think it's a council decision and not a Sophie decision.
Does that apply to committee meetings as well? The
Yeah.
chair would be like we are doing now?
Yeah.
Or the chair would be here in chambers and everyone else? would
Well,
be
if
in-
we follow the policy right now, that's the minimum we can have is the chair and staff here.
Right.
And when I say staff, I mean a member of staff.
Mhm.
It's incredibly frustrating that the state is not acting, and I
I
feel
know.
like a lot of the recent, it seemed very cut and dry last year that action needed to happen. Now we've gone through a year plus, and there's a lot of political stuff weighing into this, and that's so frustrating to me. We really need direction from the state. That aside, as somebody who is nervous about being in public with people, and because I have an unvaccinated child at home, we made this policy at a time when we were dealing with the Alpha variant. People who were vaccinated were not at high risk for catching or transmitting the virus. We were not required to wear face coverings if we're fully vaccinated. That was when we created this policy, it was an entirely different ballgame than where we're at now. And I really think, as much as I far prefer in-person meetings, I think that it would be better for us to have the remote option to go back to that while the Delta variant is still running rampant through the state. And I agree with you that wearing masks in council chamber and not being able to see people's faces I don't think that is in the best interest of our group dynamic or our interactions with the public. So, any option that we can get to move as much of this as possible remote, I think that we should consider changing the policy to do that.
Yeah, and I think that, can we revise the policy so the chair can be remote as well?
I think that is where I would suggest we do.
Okay, that's
The
where I would
revision.
want to go, because I don't think that that's a good dynamic to have the chair,
So
meeting wise.
from my perspective, when we were doing the Hollywood Squares thing, and I could see everybody and I could talk to people, and I felt closer than I do today, sitting in this room. And I
think we should move to that.
So I think we had a lot more public participation too, when we were Zooming. I think we had a lot of people tune in and knew what was going on.
Or actually, what I will say is we might have a lot of public participation right now online. I have no idea.
But we don't
Like,
know.
at least when I'm on remote, I can see on
What's
Zoom
happening.
and on Facebook who's interacting, who's watching, who's asking questions. I have no idea if the public's watching this right now or not, or whether they want to talk to us or have opinions about anything.
And I would like to say too that, so I just started back up at the university and and I'm nervous. And I'm not nervous about, I mean, I'm vaccinated and everything. I'm nervous that I might be a carrier. And that makes me nervous. And I know the kids are vaccinated and they definitely have vaccination policies and we are masking in class. I mean, it just started today, but I walk out there and this might be just a post-traumatic stress thing after the COVID, but there's people everywhere. And I just am like, oh my God. And it might be a reaction or a response to being so isolated, for the last 18 months. But I feel like, oh my God, like I might be carrying this virus and giving it to people and not know. So I'm masking everywhere in stores and, everywhere, because I just don't, it's just hard to know.
So I have some questions for Roger, who is the lawyer that wrote with me the policy. Based on what I'm hearing, I don't want to cut anybody off if anybody can.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
What is the benefit of having you sit in this space if the rest of us are remote?
So it depends on the interpretation of state law. If council or Tom can declare us as being able to go fully remote, then I would sit in my office where I've sat all the way through. If somebody has to, if the answer is there has to be a public place that people can go to witness the meeting, I would much prefer I would prefer to sit here probably by myself or maybe with Sawyer. Sawyer likes to join us every once in a while. But you notice, I asked all my staff to remote in today. I did not want a lot of people in the room. So that would be the idea. And the idea being, unless people showed up, I would be remote with my laptop.
I just didn't want to
So
write a
you
policy
wouldn't-
that forced you to sit at the folding table when.
We were all home.
Yeah.
That's all right, because through the entire pandemic, Jeff, I think I did like 2 or 3 meetings total at home. My dogs bark too much.
Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is get some advice from Roger as to how we can most carefully proceed. If it means a special meeting to adopt a policy change, then we could even just have 4 counselors here who feel comfortable, who can pass the policy so that we can do the September 13th meeting remote.
That sounds good.
Does that sound good?
Yeah,
All right.
I can make that happen.
I wonder if there is any value in petitioning the governor to consider a statewide change.
Well, let me ask Kate DeFore.
There you go.
I was gonna say I could ask Kathy.
We have some influence down there. Okay,
Yeah, everything else can wait.
ready to adjourn this meeting? So let's have a motion to adjourn. Second, and all in favor, I assume. And can we just take a 3-minute break before
We
we start
sure
our
can.
special meeting?
We sure can. Belle?
Yes.
If you want to keep the Zoom going through the calling of the executive session, and then we'll announce that we're not going to take any action out of that meeting.
Sounds
And-
like a plan.
You could turn it off.
Yep.
Tomorrow morning, I've got an 8 o'clock on my calendar. Are you around to participate with that?
Let me just double check my calendar. I gotta scroll way up to find 8 a.m. Yes, I am.
All right, I might be a couple minutes late because I have a meeting with staff and Ally, but I will be along.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
If you guys are gonna be taking a brief break, might I suggest that you mute your microphone until you're ready to resume business?
Had to get water. My daughter's freaking out at home, unprepared for school, even though she told me she was prepared.
I had one too. It's like, can you send me 25 bucks?
Mom, I'm completely unprepared for tomorrow. Okay.
So we'll call our special town council meeting to order. Roll call shows all members present. The first item, discussion of draft elements of FY '22 town council work plan, is going to be postponed until the September meeting. And we're going to have an executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA paragraph 405A to discuss expectations and performance within the council town manager relationship. And I'd like to have a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you. And all those in favor? We are in executive session. As soon as the press is gone.
So we're gonna end this meeting because we're not gonna take any action.
Yep.
All right, I am ending the meeting right now. Have a great night, everybody.